Hello, and welcome to the League of Women Voters of Portland's Voter Forum for candidates running for election to the office of Multnomah County Commission, District 2. I'm Debbie Kay, immediate past president of the League and the moderator for this forum. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization dedicated to making democracy work. We believe democracy works best when voters are informed about issues and engaged in their communities. We're presenting this forum to eligible voters for the opportunity to learn more about these candidates. The League is grateful for support from the Carol and Velma Sailing Foundation, the Weiss Foundation, the League of Women Voters of Portland Education Fund, and our media partner, Metro East Community Media. The candidates for this forum are the top two finishers for this office from the primary election last May. They are Sam Adams and Shannon Singleton. We welcome these candidates and thank them for participating. Under the voter forum protocol agreed to in writing by the candidates for this event, each of the speakers will give a 1-minute opening statement, followed by questions we have prepared based on League positions and the League members' interests. Each candidate will be allowed a 1-minute closing, and each will have up to 60 seconds to answer each question. The initial order of speakers here is determined by the Oregon Secretary of State's random alphabet for this election, and then alternating. The candidate giving the first opening statement will give the first closing statement. Mr. Adams will give the first opening statement. Please proceed. You have 1 minute.
Well, thank you, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for this opportunity to address you and to participate in this forum. So too often, Multnomah County, despite having great talented staff, some great leaders, and great community partners, too often Multnomah County lacks urgency, focus, lacks good partnershiping, and lacks accountability. And that hurts our overall effort to recover as a community. It also especially hurts those that are the most vulnerable in our community. And I have an affinity for those folks as someone who grew up in a family that at a certain point disintegrated, and we got by with public housing and food stamps and food pantry food. So I have an affinity to those that are the core targeted sort of clients and folks that the county intends to serve. I offer the ability to work with bringing people together and big bureaucracies and getting the kind of change needed that we require to move forward.
Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that was your time. Ms. Singleton, please go ahead with your opening statement.
Thank you, Debbie, and thank you, League of Women Voters. I'm Shannon Singleton, and I'm running for Multnomah County for District 2 because the county is the largest social service agency in the state, and it is past due time for someone with experience and a track record of results to get to serve on this board. I've spent my almost 30-year career in social work, moving people into housing, providing treatment, creating programs and policies that push against the status quo and the systems that have failed so many of us. I'm running because it is time to move past the politics of division and chaos, to turn the page on politicians pointing fingers at each other, and elect a collaborative leader who is ready to get things done and move us forward with transparency, accountability, and hope. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first question goes to Ms. Singleton, and here it is. If elected, what is the single most important goal that you would hope to accomplish as a county commissioner?
Thank you, Debbie. I think in response to what we hear from voters as well, again, speaking to my experience, it is to address homelessness, and particularly for us to really look at what is the data that we're using to evaluate programs and stop funding things that aren't working. I'd like to see us reduce shelter homelessness, but I'd also like to see us increase our permanent housing placement, as well as increase our retention services. We have far too many people falling out of housing and back into homelessness in this community.
Thank you. Mr. Adams, same question to you.
Yes, so I've detailed my action plan, if elected, that I would pursue, and the goal is a functional end to homelessness. And a companion to that is also a detailed plan for how to exponentially increase the availability of affordable housing. Key to my efforts to end homelessness will be better use of the $700 million that's currently being spent in a patchwork way between the county, Home Forward, and the city of Portland.
Thank you. Our next question to Mr. Adams. What role, if any, do you think Multnomah County should play in addressing income inequality in the county?
I think that the county can play an important role, especially for those that lack the kind of income that allows them to get the basic services that they need, including shelter, homes, a house, including access to food, access to the kinds of medical treatment that's necessary. I think that is at the core, offering those services and that assistance as people are struggling, as people are trying to get through tough times, I think is at the core of what is the mission of Multnomah County.
Thank you. Ms. Singleton, your response.
I think the county has a couple of roles in addressing income inequality. One is with our contracted providers. We should be ensuring that we're paying living wage jobs when we contract out services, whether that's our janitors or our social workers. Additionally, I think the county should revisit what was a successful program with giving some basic income to mothers and seeing how successful they were in addressing their needs and their families' needs. And additionally, it is those basic services that we provide and ensuring that we're getting those to the people who need them most to help overcome the gaps that we have. And then finally, I would say we have a lot of workforce development opportunity, and I would love to see us putting our folks in the anti-poverty system who come needing rent assistance and get them connected to workforce development, particularly as we see a huge increase in infrastructure projects and opportunities with the trades. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question to you, Ms. Singleton. Please comment on any actions that you would consider to address concerns related to the critical energy infrastructure hub on the Willamette River.
Thanks, Debbie. The CEI hub is such a big deal for our community, and it's actually an issue for the whole state. I really want to continue working with the partnership that Commissioner Jayapal had established with our state legislators and continuing to work with Representative Nelson to ensure that we are addressing a study bill to understand the impacts and needs, as well as we need to be addressing the immediacy for that community of safety and being able to evacuate in case of an emergency. And then finally, I support the conversation the county has started regarding risk bonding and would like to see that progress and move forward.
Thank you. Mr. Adams, your response.
Yeah, I think there are three things that need to occur as quickly as possible. One is the sites that we're talking about contain tanks that are not in use, have not been in use, and will not be in use. And in the event of, let's say, an earthquake or a flood, they're going to become dangerous to all the other infrastructure that's there in terms of tanks that are full of material, knocking into them, displacing them, causing spillage. Second to that, related to that, is to have making sure that we have the proper containment walls around and safety walls around each of these facilities in the event that there is leakage. And third, the connections. Many of the connections to and from the site are ancient and need to be upgraded. And the county can play, along with the city and the state and federal government, can play a key role in making sure that these three actions happen and reduce the overall risk.
Thank you. You are watching the video of the Voter Forum of the League of Women Voters of Portland, or listening to our podcast for candidates running for Multnomah County Commission District 2. Our next question to Mr. Adams: what role would you support for Multnomah County to play in addressing the supply of housing in the region?
Well, on my site, multcoforsam.com, you can see my detailed plan for treating the housing emergency, that affordable housing emergency that we continue to face, what I would do about it in detail. I think one of the most practical things is to get clear on the kind of housing that Multnomah County needs for its clients. The second is to agree to a portion of the regional tax for homelessness, that a portion beyond what was anticipated when it was passed originally, and we'll have to send this back to the voters, that a portion of that be dedicated to affordable housing, and that it plays an important support role in terms of helping the city in its core mission to actually build that affordable housing. These are some of the things that can happen, but it takes putting one person in charge, an incident commander, a housing czar, that can get through the bureaucracy and make sure that more housing is built to meet the unmet needs, of which is ample.
Thank you. Ms. Singleton, your answer, please.
Thank you, Debbie. So I see a couple of places the county can play a role in supply of housing. One is with any underspend of supportive housing services dollars to continue what I was able to do at the Joint Office of Homeless Services and Land Bank to purchase properties and bring them into the affordable housing portfolio, like preservation we saw the Portland Housing Bureau recently embark on. Additionally, I think there's opportunity to take some of the hotels that we purchased while I was at the county for shelter and convert them into housing to prove what we're able to do and see what that cost really is, so we can increase housing supply that way. And additionally, we have to continue to support funding from the state to develop affordable housing, as well as the new TIF districts that the city of Portland has chosen to implement.
Thank you. Our next question to Ms. Singleton: what, if any, changes in the county's policies concerning addiction treatment and recovery would you support?
I would support us looking more holistically at addictions treatment. We're primarily focused right now in the community on this sobering center or places for deflection. And while that's an important component, it is but one part of the whole system in need. We need more treatment beds. We need transitional housing recovery programs for folks who need that type of service. And then we also need to help move people out of those units and back into permanent housing so they're not stuck in that system and in that logjam. Additionally, I'd really like to see us get more mobile mental health and addiction, both staff, clinicians, as well as peers, out in the community and meeting with people, whether they're on the streets, in a shelter. As they travel through the system, those services should stay with them.
Thank you. Mr. Adams, your response?
And I agree with much of what Shannon just said. And we need to dig into that $700 million, the upwards of $700 million that's currently being budgeted by the county, the city, and Home Forward, and look for opportunities for savings, reprioritization, to have the resources and be able to bring those services online. We can't just wait. If we get money from the federal government, if we get money from state government, more money to help out, great, but $700 million is a large amount of money that is currently being spent in a patchwork, siloed basis, and it's time for that budgeting to be done in a unified form and to find the savings, to find the reprioritization to bring these kinds of services online.
Thank you. Our next question to you, Mr. Adams. And you've both addressed this in some ways. The city of Portland and Multnomah County have many overlapping or shared responsibilities, such as transportation, public safety, and issues in homelessness. How would you encourage effective cooperation between these two governments?
So one of the reasons I chose to run for Multnomah County is to help the city of Portland and cities in general that exist within the county work better with the county itself. I think getting on the same informational sort of page in terms of better defining what are successful outcomes is key. There's been ideological differences, or there's been ideological sort of different emphasis. The city has had to deal with a massive uptick in people experiencing outdoor houselessness. And it has had to deal with that to the point that when I was back at the city, we had to come up with our own shelter system, one that we worked very hard on that had a lot of input from folks experiencing homelessness themselves. And we're seeing that those outdoor shelters are now getting 3 times the number of people into permanent housing than what is being offered in congregate shelter from the county. So that's an example of getting the city and the county working better together.
Thank you. Ms. Singleton.
Thank you. So I think really working effectively with partnerships, whether it's the city of Portland or cities in the East County, as well as Metro, and our surrounding counties as well with Washington and Clackamas County. It's really about, for me, our ability to be able to work together and focus on the issues at hand. I think that I have the track record of having effective partnerships with people who don't necessarily agree with me. And I've had really amazing conversations with many of the city council candidates across districts, as well as other county commissioners, to look at how we can move past the space that we're currently in of finger pointing and turn the page on those old politics to move forward and remember our values and that we are there to serve the people who elect us.
Okay. Ms. Singleton, this question to you. What, if any, weight should voters give the number of a candidate's financial supporters, the identities of their donors, and the amount of their average contributions?
I think that for the county, folks are still getting used to the new campaign finance limits. So I think that people should really look at what is a candidate's values and their goals, and do they speak to you? While financing and fundraising is an important component of campaigning, it's not the only component of campaigning. So I really encourage folks to not just look at finances, but to look at all the different things that I bring to this race and to the county commission should I be elected.
Great, thank you. Mr. Adams?
I think some weight should be given to it, but I also believe what our backgrounds are, what our proven abilities are, and what we're proposing, not just what needs to get done, but how much specificity are the candidates offering in terms of how to get it done. I believe how is the new what when it comes to campaigning.
Okay. Our next question to Mr. Adams. We're leaning hard into houselessness issues here because it's such a prominent topic and challenge to our community. Today, the county chair sent an email to residents titled, "Encouraging Developments in Homelessness Response." What are your ideas for addressing the homelessness crisis in the county that show, what ideas for addressing the homelessness crisis in the county do you think show particular promise?
As I touched on a little before at the city, because we didn't get anywhere with the county in terms of developing with the county outdoor official shelter sites and a phased-in ban on camping to go with that. We developed our own at the city, and an independent study by Portland State University found that those outdoor shelter sites, those shelter operations that were put up by the city mostly and funded by the city, are getting 3 times the number of people into permanent housing than the city's traditional congregate shelters, which is lots of cots in one big room. And I think that is very promising and would continue to continue the work that my team and I started at the city, because it's showing real promise. 3 times the number of people getting into permanent housing compared to what the congregate shelters. That's a big improvement, and I believe more improvement can be achieved.
Thank you. Ms. Singleton, your response?
Thank you. I think, as the data shows, it's where places have, when people have a door to close or a place that's more private, they tend to be doing better in getting out of shelter. So whether that's our hotel, motel shelters, our alternative shelter sites, our sites like Dignity Village, Right to Dream 2, all the different safe rest villages, those models are showing better outcomes. And I think we need to continue to ensure that we're providing the services and dollars to help people move out of those. And if we're going to continue congregate shelters, we need to be looking at providing the services and funding to get folks out of those as well. Additionally, mobile services work. ICE created a program called Mobile Permanent Supportive Housing Team, and they have over a 98% success rate in keeping people retained in their housing. When we know something works that well, we need to replicate it and expand it.
Okay. Our next question to you, Ms. Singleton. What is your assessment of the implementation of the Preschool for All program so far? What steps should the county take to ensure full implementation by 2030?
I think the implementation has been lagging. We continue to see underspent funds while we have a need out there in our provider community. I continue to hear from advocates on the ground and childcare providers, as well as frontline workers, that these gaps persist. And so we need to move that funding out the door and get it into the hands of folks. It's a life-changing program, as my friend told me, who finally qualified for it this year. It changes their entire lives as a family of having that preschool slot. So we need to fund, whether it's the back end that family providers need, and provide that economic backbone and stability for them so that they can take care of their bills and really run the program. In addition to, again, assessing where the gaps and looking at the opportunities to leverage resources. Childcare conversations happening on every major infrastructure project in this region. We should all be sitting down together to find a solution.
Thank you. Mr. Adams, your response.
So there's the Early Childhood Initiative. There's a number of other initiatives, the Sun Schools, that's operated by both the county and the city. So there's a constellation of educational support, of family support for more educational achievement that I would like to look at together with the chair and the board if elected, to look for synergies, to look for opportunities for better support amongst both ways, amongst like the Children's Levy and Preschool for All. The Children's Levy was adopted first by voters in the 1990s. Preschool for All was adopted independently, separately from that. I think there's opportunity, or at least an important work to look at those kinds of synergies. I also just want to say on this that I support the reforms to the tax itself that have been put forward by Commissioner Julia Brim Edwards to help peg the tax to inflation, among other reforms.
Thank you. This is an issue that's come to the fore around the country. To what extent, if any, should a public office holder be expected to model integrity in their behavior, and why? To you, Mr. Adams.
Yeah, absolutely. These are difficult jobs when you take on a role like a county board member or another elected official or appointed official in either of these local governments. These are difficult issues, and I think that showing integrity, showing showing independent of thought and independent of action is really important, regardless of who your supporters are. Let the evidence guide the way. In addition to listening to what your constituents want. I think those two are really important when it comes to integrity for elected officials.
Thank you. Ms. Singleton?
Thank you, Debbie. I absolutely think that elected officials should be held up as role models and really holding that integrity. It's something that I've done throughout my career as a social worker and something that I would continue to do in this role as county commissioner. I think it's vital that we're there and focused on serving the people that we're there to serve and really focusing on how are we really listening to not only the people in the community, but those most impacted by the decisions that we have in front of us, both whether that is a policy and in our budget. Budgets are moral documents, and we really need to be focusing on how are we living our values, how are we enacting the policies and programs the community wants, and how are we standing true to our values and upholding the integrity of the office.
Thank you. Next question to you, Ms. Singleton. What changes, if any, would you support in the conflict of interest rules applicable to county commissioners?
I don't know that I have any changes to the conflict of interest rules. I think we have robust conflict of interest rules throughout this state. I've had to comply with them, whether I was sitting on a commission like the Portland Housing Advisory Commission or when I was in Governor Brown's office. Conflicts are real, and we need to acknowledge those and keep them out of our politics.
Thank you. Mr. Adams?
Multnomah County does not have a requirement that special interest lobbyists register as such and report who their clients are, report what kind of issues they're lobbying, which elected and appointed officials. Multnomah County is the last large county on the West Coast without lobbying, registration, and reporting requirements. And it's a real deficit. It's a real hold in terms of being able to manage conflicts of interest, the fact that there are no reporting requirements. I would also require that elected officials post their most recent calendar as is required in the city of Portland from the previous week, so folks can see who individuals are meeting with in near real time. If the President of the United States can be required to do this, I think Multnomah County Board of Commissioners should be required to do it as well. This is a big deficit with the county.
Thank you. Next question to you, Mr. Adams, on budgeting. The most recent budget of the Multnomah County Commission was more than $3.6 billion. How can you assure voters that your experience and education have prepared you to oversee and approve a budget this size?
So I've either been a key advisor to local government executives or been a local government member of a governing body on the city council, or as mayor proposed my own budgets. And I will tell you by observation, the county's budget process is extremely broken. When you're delivering a nearly $4 billion budget to the board the night before you're asking them to vote on it the next day, that shows just how broken the oversight and budgeting process is for Multnomah County. It is one of the first things that I would focus on if I'm elected, to dig into that, where the money's going, what are the outcomes that are supposed to be being achieved, and design a budget process that's much, much, much more transparent.
Thank you. Ms. Singleton, your answer.
Thank you. During my time as a nonprofit leader, I oversaw budgets in my agencies that were multi-million-dollar budgets annually as well. I think really the big experience for me comes from my time at the state with Governor Brown, where I was not only a part of every budget meeting with every state agency, but literally wrote the guide for them on how to develop a budget utilizing community input and centering racial equity in their priorities on how they budget and their top policy issues. I would bring that experience into this role as county commissioner, having both, again, not only developed a budget, been a part of developing a budget for the entire state of Oregon, but also then implementing that and tracking outcomes, utilizing the data and holding agencies accountable.
Thank you. Question to you, Ms. Singleton. What, if any, reforms would you support in the process of electing Multnomah County commissioners?
Well, we have some reforms coming down the pike already as a part of charter reform for the county. And so next election, we will see a ranked choice voting coming in place for county commission. I think that that is something we have to see what it looks like before I would ever propose reforms to something we haven't implemented. And that's about it for me.
Thank you. Mr. Adams?
Can you repeat the question?
Certainly. Oops, sorry.
All right.
What, if any, reforms would you support in the process of electing Multnomah County commissioners?
So I think if referencing back to one of your earlier questions, I think that more stringent guidelines, if this passes legal muster, on independent expenditure campaigns intended to impact county elections. I think that would be tough, but if possible, I would like to see more transparency in the independent expenditure campaigns that are involved in all of these races or all county ballot measures or signature initiative petitions.
Thank you. Next question to you, Mr. Adams. What role, if any, should international affairs play in the agenda of the Multnomah County Commission, and why?
I think it's important to on a infrequent basis for the county board to express its sentiment on national or international issues. I think that can be appropriate. Obviously we live in a nation and a globe, but I think doing so as we sought to do it, the city, both doing that, but doing it in a sparing basis, so that the focus of the work and in doing so also look for the local nexus to those national and international issues as well, and doing so on a sparing basis because there are a lot of global and national issues, obviously.
Right. Ms. Singleton?
I think that the county sometimes has a role to play when it comes to value statements and supporting, for example, a ceasefire in Gaza like they did a couple of months ago. Additionally, there's international issues that are things like the COVID-19 pandemic, where it was vital for us to pay attention to what was happening in the state nationally, but also I think internationally, and what was emerging best practices in dealing with the disease at the time. So that's really, I think it depends on what the issue is, but agree there's times that we'll need to really be leaning into that, and other times where we have to really be thoughtful about making a statement and staying true to our values without it overtaking the agenda and the work of the county.
Thank you. To our audience, we are pleased that you are watching the video of the Voter Forum for the League of Women Voters of Portland, or listening to our podcast for candidates running in Multnomah County Commission District 2. Our next question to Ms. Singleton. Are you satisfied with the performance of the Joint Office of Homeless Services? And if not, what changes would you support? I acknowledge that you've both dealt with this question to some extent, but this is an opportunity for any additional observations.
Thank you. So I've continued to give the joint office a C. I think that they have had some improvements in getting funds out the door. I think that that is still a need, and I continue to hear from providers that they run out of rent assistance, and then we have underspend at the county. That cannot continue. If we have rent assistance, we should get it out the door into the hands of our providers. Another thing I would change about the joint office is getting back to pre-pandemic days when they used to meet regularly with all of the providers of a different service. We used to have shelter meetings where you could have conversations about best practices, what you might be hearing emerging, opportunities for case coordination, and those disappeared. During my time at the joint office for about 8 months, we designed the whole system to get those back up and running, and I'm disappointed that they haven't started happening yet.
Thank you. Mr. Adams, anything you want to add to your prior response?
So I encourage folks to go to multcoforsam.com and see my plan for homelessness. And, you know, the goal is the functional end to homelessness. And doing that requires not having 12 people and 13, 12, 20 people and, you know, multiple organizations in charge. And all the patchwork and scatterness that happens with that, even now with a slightly improved joint office, but have jointly appointed by the city, the county, the local efforts for the state, Home Forward, one individual, that's the czar, the homelessness czar, and proceed with unified budgeting of that $700 million, putting together finally a one-stop care client system so that it follows the individual and helps make sure that they get the treatments that they need. That's number two. And number three, an annual report card that's produced independently that would go to every address in the county describing where and what we're getting for that $700 million, upwards of $700 million.
Thank you. Mr. Adams, in related material, as we've learned, what, if any, changes in the county's policies concerning addiction treatment and recovery would you support?
Well, I think the initial expression by the chair for the deflection center was the wrong place to start. It's improving. But I also believe that the sobering center should be developed on a parallel track with that. And then we get to this cul-de-sac where there aren't adequate services after that for the follow-on recovery and follow-on care. And that's where I go back to $700 million. We can't wait for someone else to do that. We can't pretend that it's just going to magically appear. We got to roll up our sleeves, dig into that large amount of money, find savings, reprioritize so that the follow-on services, we've got good deflection, we've got good sobering, we need multiple sobering centers, and then the follow-on treatment and housing and supportive housing is there as well. We need to dig into the budget and find the resources for this whole continuum.
Thank you. Ms. Singleton, your answer.
So as I mentioned earlier, I keep asking myself, where are we deflecting people to? We need to have these additional beds, whether that's the recovery housing that we've talked about earlier, or that is sobering centers, and or frankly, even if it's outpatient treatment, people getting access to care is a lack in this community. Additionally, I would like to have a conversation with our private providers of addiction services and understand what it would take for them to be able and willing to accept Medicaid and or Medicare. We have a bit of a challenge where some providers, it's not an incentive to take insurance that often reimburses at a very low rate. But we should have the conversation because sometimes we do have beds within those private services that are going unused. And I would like to explore opportunities to use them.
Thank you. To you, Ms. Singleton, explain how you would approach approval or disapproval of legal settlements of claims against the county.
Thank you, Debbie. I don't know that I would have anything particularly different around claims at the county. I think that if we, each one needs to be taken at an individual level and understanding what happened and understanding the background of it before we jump to sweeping any sort of sweeping policy change.
Okay, Mr. Adams, your answer?
In terms of settlement claims, I think procuring the services, because it would have to be potentially confidential services of outside legal experts on a regular basis to sort of look back at a swath of settlement claims and do due diligence on them. So to get an alternative view, sometimes they're highly technical. Are the settlement claims, during a year's period of time or a quarter or half a year's period of time, were they reasonable? Were they being done with the appropriate amount of due diligence, as opposed to going on for litigation? Was settlement the least cost or best option for other reasons? I think regular review from outside non-employee experts would be a good thing to do on a regular basis.
Thank you. To you, Mr. Adams, are you satisfied with the board's current administration of animal services? Why or why not? And if not, what changes would you support?
Well, I think the continuing problems that we're having at animal services that are showing up in the audits and among advocates, we really need to listen to. I'm very intrigued and come at the proposal of a new facility with a completely open mind, and or slightly favoring it, knowing the facility that they're working in now is absolutely decrepit and out of date. So this is a trust that the public puts in us in terms for animal services. And, I would want to scrub the proposal for the $60 million new facility and want to see tangible, that it will lead to tangible benefits and outcomes. But I do so intrigued and hopefully can be supported.
Thank you. Ms. Singleton?
Thank you. We've clearly seen an improvement in the audit, the more recent audit, and some things being implemented, but there is a lack. So I really would support looking at what it will take to get this done. Particularly the documentation and staffing needs continue to be unaddressed, as well as what is really important to me is, and a glaring lack, is that they have not completed the training that they need as staff to ensure that it is a safe workplace free from harassment and bullying. And that's something I think we absolutely must have across our county department. People deserve to work in a safe environment. So really take a look at what it will take to fully implement the audit recommendations and help move animal services forward.
Thank you. Our next question to you, Ms. Singleton. What do you describe as the attributes of an outstanding commission chair?
I think a chair really needs to be able to put ego aside and work across the county commission as well as with other elected leadership in the region to address our top issues in this community. I look for somebody who has values that match Multnomah County, and really that kind of empathy with accountability is something that I'd like to see. I believe we need to have more transparency in how we're addressing our issues at the county and having those open dialogues about what opportunities exist to move us forward. And I think that a chair has to be able to make decisions. You want to have process. You want to hear from the people most impacted. You want to hear from the folks in Multnomah County, but you can't process forever. You must move forward and make definitive decisions, try something out and keep us moving so that we can always adjust, but not doing anything is no longer an option.
Thank you. Mr. Adams.
I think a deep appreciation and recognition that the chair works as the leader of a team, and that team is the other elected officials within Multnomah County. And key among them would be the board, the other four members of the board from the chair. I think it's really important that the chair, in leading the organization, have a plan. And it's shocking that a $4 billion municipal organization or local government organization, I should say, has no plan, scant measures, and a budget process that is, as I already described before, gets set in billion-dollar decisions are set in front of the board, which has the fiduciary responsibility for scrubbing the budget, is given one night to do so before their first vote. So I think a plan and a budget that follows that plan, that's widely embraced by the community, by the staff, and by the other elected officials.
This is our last question before your closing remarks, and this is to you, Mr. Adams, first. What individuals or entities have contributed the most money to your campaign?
Well, they can't contribute more than $568. So I have a list of supporters on my website, multcoforsam.com. And so there are a variety of different levels of giving to my campaign, but it would be a tie among dozens of people, and I don't know them by heart.
Ms. Singleton?
Thank you. I think similarly, I have a number of folks who have donated the maximum, whether that is with dollars or with in-kind donations or time. So I have both supporters who have been able to contribute financially, but also those who show up every weekend to canvass with me and knock doors and talk to voters. Those who sign up to give me in-kind donations for postcard stamps. So really, I look at the whole range of supporters of my campaign. And it's a grassroots campaign that is just people-powered, and we have so many amazing folks supporting me.
Thank you very much. And thank you both. That's the end of our questions. The candidates may now provide their closing statements, with Mr. Adams going first. Please go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Well, thank you. And thanks to the League of Women Voters for this opportunity to discuss these important issues. I'm excited at the prospects of bringing more accountability, more urgency, more focus, better partnershiping to Multnomah County, and to bring my experience from the city to the county to get the city of Portland and all cities in the county working better together. I bring with me the experience of working with bringing people together with large bureaucracies to make change on difficult issues, whether that's from public safety to transportation. I have experience working across a wide variety of issues that I think I can bring to bear to get the city and county working better together, and to get the county just working better, which is so much needed right now. The county is sort of the anchor that prevents the rest of our local area from moving forward to recovery faster for everybody. So again, thank you for the opportunity for you to host this forum.
You're very welcome. Ms. Singleton?
Thank you, Debbie. So there's a real choice in this race, and I, like many others, am tired of the finger pointing of the politics of old. I think it's time for us to elect a commissioner who can take us forward to be the community that lives our values. I know we can push against the status quo and that we can move our community forward. I'm ready to do that from day one. I'm ready to do that with the transparency, accountability, and hope that I mentioned earlier. And I'm ready to do that not just for District 2, but for our county commission as a whole. Thank you so much.
Thank you both for being with us. This concludes today's voter forum with the candidates for the 2nd District of the Multnomah County Commission. We thank you both for your participation. Audience, please share this forum and recording and podcast with your family and friends. We all need to be informed voters. If you are registered to vote by October 15th, you should receive your ballot by October 22nd. As with all Oregon elections, most all voters will participate by mailing their ballots, although in-person voting is available. Check your Multnomah County voters pamphlet online or when the paper copy arrives by mail at your household. To be counted, ballots must be postmarked by Tuesday, November 5th at 8 p.m. You can also find an official ballot drop box location near you by checking the League's website, the national website, www.vote411.org, or in the Multnomah County Voters Pamphlet. The League of Women Voters is a nonprofit membership organization. We hope this forum was meaningful and helpful to you. We welcome you to join or contribute at our website, lwvpdx.org. This website also has excellent, nonpartisan election information. This is Debbie Kay for the League of Women Voters of Portland. Thank you very much for watching and listening and for being an informed voter. And remember, your vote is your voice and it matters. Thank you.